4 back in the building. We're coming with the second upload video. There was an issue at the beginning of the first video, so I want to go ahead and clear that up. We strive for progress, not for perfection. At the beginning of every video, we are going to give a Dr. Carter G. Woodson quote from The Miseducation of the Negro. The initial quote that wasn't properly edited on the first video states the following. Philosophers have long conceded, however, that every man has two educations, that which is given him and the other that which he gives himself. Of the two kinds, the latter is by far the more desirable. Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Tonight's quote from The Miseducation of the Negro, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, states the following. If a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Let's get into the definition of school. School, any institution at which instruction is given in a particular discipline. Education, an enlightening experience. Let's get educated tonight about the American descendants of slavery. Tonight's black inventor, Mr. John Standard, invented the refrigerator, Federal Patent 455891, July 14th, 1891. So every time you put food in your refrigerator or take food out of your refrigerator for the remainder of your life, just know an American descendant of the institution of slavery invented the refrigerator. Mr. John Standard. The 13 practical steps for American descendants of slavery, which is a 13-week practical program of action for each American descendant of slavery. Step 1, learn about the estate or estates your family originated from. Step 2, who established that estate? Step 3, what nation and confederacy had jurisdiction over that area prior to the European? Step 4, ask all nonprofit organizations you attend, what's your position on reparations? Step 5, they either support it or they don't. No support, no money. However, if they support it, then immediately children and adults need weekly classes free of charge about steps 1, 2, and 3. In addition, field trips to ADOS landmarks in that city, county, and state are needed. Step 6, don't support European holidays for the remainder of the year. Step 7, avoid spending money with any small business that doesn't hire your people. Step 8, all businesses need operating cash. Spend money with American black businesses. Step 9, all other groups rely on our energy and operating cash to survive. Set the trends of making other groups follow our lead and support our clubs, services, products, and entertainment. Step 10, the United States government is bankrupt. The Federal Reserve prints money, i.e. quantitative easing. It also burns money, i.e. quantitative tightening. The U.S. dollar hasn't been backed by gold since Richard Nixon in 1971. The government operates off the full faith of its citizens to pay debt and taxes. American descendants of slavery no longer have faith in the United States government. This is why financial support will be altered, stopped, and redirected. Step 11. Teach your kids 1 hour a day about their history on this land. Subsection A. Have them learn about a black inventor. Subsection B. Have them know about our heroes. Subsection C. They should know the European that conquered the estate you live in. Subsection D. They should know the nation of people prior to European invasion militarily and culturally. Step 12. Practicing these steps will educate us on the land we're claiming, America, and attaches us to the U.S. government and laws. Every estate American descendants of slavery live in should have steps 1, 2, and 3 advertised via social media, radio, and newspaper. This in 13 weeks, one fiscal quarter, will bring us together for our common cause. So here we are. This is the second video, and the foundation was laid last night, giving an example of my own personal family lineage. And so I just want to do a quick recap before we get into the first Seminole War. As previously stated on the first video, King George II sent General James Oglethorpe to establish the colony known as Georgia. That colony was established to stop American descendants of slavery from escaping the legal construct of slavery in the Carolinas. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie history in with our struggle. So by 1751, Georgia made slavery legal. So the state of Georgia was established in 1733, 1751, slavery was made legal. But let's step back for a second. After James Oglethorpe established the colony of Georgia in 1733, 6 years later, in 1739, the Spanish governor of Florida, Manuel de Montiano, had Fort Mose built and established as a free black settlement, which is our first settlement, the first to be legally sanctioned in what would become the territory of the United States. So understand, in 1739, the Spanish governor fronted us a fort. Now we have military protection on top of our operation that we already have going on, independent, outside of the European legal construct known as slavery. 1740, less than a year after the governor of Spain allowed Maroons to have a fort by the name of Mose, your boy James Oglethorpe ordered British soldiers to take Fort Mose. June 26, 1740, Seminoles and Maroons, along with Spanish troops, performed a surprise attack, killing the British colonel by the name of Palmer, the captains, the lieutenants, and soldiers were killed, and the battle destroyed the fort. So understand something. We didn't even have the fort 1 year before James Oglethorpe, on the orders of King George II from England, decided to hate on our progress. So the general comes down with his troops. We kill all of them and destroy the fort at the same time. Here's where it gets interesting. Now keep in mind, after 1740, and prior to 1740 and prior to 1733, before they established Georgia, the Underground Railroad was up and running. Maroons were escaping every chance they got from the Carolinas. They were also escaping from the Alabama area as well. So Florida was the free zone, whether you were coming down the East Coast, through the Carolinas, through now what we know as Savannah, through Augusta, coming down into Jacksonville, which is how we ended up in St. Augustine, which was where Fort Mose was located. We also were escaping slavery in the Alabama area. And I'm going to throw a key out there for all my native Alabamians. Alabama was a nation that Native Americans were named. So that state is indigenous. That name, Alabama, is indigenous to a native nation that was already here. We link up with them in Florida, on the West Coast, up in the Panhandle area. So you got American descendants of slavery coming out of Alabama, and then you got American descendants of slavery coming out of the Carolinas through now what we know as Georgia, coming into Florida on the East Coast as well. So let's get into the first Seminole War. Georgia slaveholders understood that Maroon and Black Seminole camps could put an end to their slave system. They had a problem enslaving us. Now, we were never told this growing up. We were always told about the house Negroes and the field Negroes, but the real ones in our group, we were hitting it every chance we got. We were going to Florida. The slave owners understood this. They're losing money. This whole story of American history, when you input the European into it, it's a story of accounting. We were dollars per unit. When you hired a man and you knew you weren't going to pay that man, you made an initial investment. You could have paid $50, $100 for that man, whatever have you. What if you didn't get a return off that investment? What if the day that you bought him and brought him to your plantation or your camp, what if he hit it the same night? That's money gone. So slave owners were losing money. So now it's become political, right? Because your business owners are going to push politicians to say, hey, we got to do something about these runaway slaves, right? And so if it wasn't for runaway slaves and if it wasn't for the Maroon Spirit, there would have never been a Georgia. Let's get to the next point. To prevent runaways escaping to Florida, a group called the Patriots plotted to annex Florida. So understand, when we hear that word patriot, that's not a friendly term to American descendants of slavery. Patriots were those same indentured servants who came from Europe, from the debtor prisons. You've worked off your debt or you were still in debt, right? You working on behalf of the British Crown. Now you're calling yourself a patriot on foreign land trying to enslave another man because your law says you have the right to do so. Okay. So here we go. We have another fort that we were never told about. The first one was on the East Coast in St. Augustine. That was Fort Mose. We had a second fort. The second fort was called Fort Negro. And that was named Fort Negro after Andrew Jackson. The next time you have a $20 bill in your hand, look at it. Look at that man. That is one of our main enemies on this land. Andrew Jackson. I won't even give him the privilege of calling him president. President of what? Of who? He didn't represent us. Fort Negro 1816 was conquered by United States government, military, and Creek mercenaries. Hold on to that thought about the Creeks. That Creek Confederation. That Creek Nation. They switched up on us. So they partnered with the United States government. Pay attention to the timeline. This is 1816. So the Europeans have constructed their legal construct called the United States government in 1776. So now we're fighting the United States government and Creek mercenaries. The Seminoles struck before the Patriots on U.S. government plantations. So here we go. They hired the Patriots to come see about the runaway slaves on the west coast of Florida. Fort Negro was on the west coast of Florida in that panhandle area. We got word that they were sending the Patriots down there to come see about us. We struck before they could get us on United States government plantations. The Seminole ranks swell from runaway slaves fleeing the plantation. You got to think about that. If house Negroes and field Negroes saw free, Maroon Spirited American descendants of slavery attack Europeans. That gave them the courage that they needed in order to run off the plantation and come run with those free-spirited builders. Seminoles destroyed a U.S. wagon train, the Georgia militia, and assassinated the Patriot leader. So once again, when we go hard, we cut the head off and the body. So not only did we get the Patriot leader, we got with the Georgia militia program as well. Understand, militia. There's militias to this day. That's a form of military. It goes back to defense. We have no defense. The European has never underestimated that he's on foreign land. Let me fast forward real quick and just throw in a key. That's no different than the Iraq War or the war in Afghanistan. Why do you think Obama and Donald Trump are talking about pulling out of that area? Because you can't colonize it. Everybody learn from our mistake in the world. You don't let the European stay on your land and colonize you and bring his religion and bring his culture into your society and bring his school system to your kids. Everybody learn from us. President James Madison was given the Patriot cause covert support. So James Madison was the president in 1816. Andrew Jackson was a general in the military. So you see the little play they got going on? They send militia, Creek mercenaries, to come handle that runaway slave problem. It didn't work. The U.S. government, represented by Andrew Jackson, who is a European hero of New Orleans, by the way. So everybody in Louisiana, do your homework on Andrew Jackson down there in New Orleans and get a real idea of how low down and medieval he was. The United States government, represented by Andrew Jackson, prepared to wipe out Seminole resistance. So after we got rid of the Georgia militia and the Patriot leader, they're hot now. Now you got the general of the military saying, okay, I'm going in. I got to solve this Seminole problem. Black Seminoles had taken over a British fortress sitting on the Apalachicola River on the Florida Panhandle. You can visit that site to the day. Anybody on that West Florida area, up in that Panhandle area, you can visit that site to this day and see the fort that we held down that was called Fort Negro. Fort Negro was manned by black officers and under Commander Garcia. Fort Negro protected Seminole plantations that spanned 50 miles. So understand, this was a real problem. Not only did we have military protection for ourselves, we had agriculture that spread 50 miles. So we had our own operation going on. We were growing our own food. We were doing everything, holding it down, trading for guns and ammo, bartering with food. Each month, new runaways joined the numbers and would in turn raid plantations. So understand what we were doing. As we were beating the military and beating these little militia groups and beating these little patriot groups, word of mouth was spreading in that immediate area on other plantations. Now we got more people hitting the Underground Railroad, trying to get to those Maroon Spirited people. And in turn, we were going back to the plantations, raiding the plantations for supplies and going back and getting our women and our kids. Conveniently, they never talk about that. We're always supposed to be docile and handcuffed and shackled. No, we were a problem. We've always been a problem. And the history of the European on this land centers around our story. Under General Jackson's orders and without a declaration of war, General Gaines marched a massive force of troops to blow up Fort Negro and restore the stolen Negroes to their rightful owners. So this whole idea about this legal construct called slavery, understand the amount of money and resources they were willing to spend to recapture people who in their mind should be legally enslaved. They were willing to send the military in to bring those runaways back to their rightful owners. The idea that you think you own another man is interesting in itself, but I want to throw another keynote in there. What happens to Native American blacks who descend from slavery in today's time? When we have riots, most recently the Mike Brown situation, or the riots back when Rodney King in the 90s, anytime we have a riot or an outbreak in society, who always comes in to stop it? The military. They've been doing this since 1816. When it comes to us, they bring the military. And we always wonder why y'all bringing the military and got your soldiers out and everything like that? Because we've always been a threat. July 1816, United States government troops and Creek mercenaries under Chief McIntosh stood before Fort Negro demanding they surrender. So as we get into this storyline throughout these Seminole Wars, we're going to learn about the politics of the Native Americans and the relationship we had with them. Understand Maroons, Seminoles, runaway Alabama, Native Americans. We were clicking up with certain Native Americans, but then we had certain Native Americans that was switching up on us. And the Creek was one of those nations that was switching up on us. Here, Chief McIntosh, under the orders of the United States government and Andrew Jackson, he going all in for him, basically. Seminoles, in turn, raised a bloody flag and a British flag before firing a cannon shot. The United States government returned a cannon shot, and it landed on the ammunition pile and exploded. Garcia was executed. Surviving women, men, and children were marched back to slavery in Georgia. Fort Negro 1816 was conquered by the United States government, military, and Creek mercenaries. So it was a fluke cannon explosion that landed on the ammo pile, and it blew up Fort Negro. And they executed Garcia, who was our leader at that particular fort. And then all the survivors, men, women, and children, you put us back in your legal construct in Georgia. Now keep in mind, slavery was made legal in 1755. All the events that I just mentioned happened in 1816. So now you're prisoners of war and you're enslaved. The U.S. government, public citizens heard nothing about this for 20 years. So Europeans that were operating in different estates on this land, the government didn't want to mention to them that you have Maroon Spirited Americans, descendants of slavery, organized militarily, economically, and we're actually going to war with them. They didn't want to let their citizens know that for 20 years. 1837, New York Judge William J. broke the story. This U.S. government's victory was the beginning and not the end. So the first Seminole War started in 1816 at Fort Negro. A fluke cannon shot hits the ammunition pile, kills a lot of people. They catch the leader Garcia. They execute him. Men, women, and children. They become prisoners of war. They get sent back to the state of Georgia to be in legal slavery. While United States government troops rejoiced off a lucky shot, hundreds of Seminole families hurried southeast to join Chief Billy Bowlegs on the Swanee River. That's another one of our heroes, family. Chief Billy Bowlegs. I want to throw another key out there to you. The current president today is Donald Trump. He's also the commander-in-chief when it comes to war. So our chief, when it came to war, in the first Seminole War, was Chief Billy Bowlegs. If you've never heard of him, look him up, do your research on him. And again, we have to start honoring our heroes. We can have our own holidays outside of European holidays. And a lot of us, this sounds foreign. When I'm saying this, a friend of mine asked me, man, why did you break it down into 12 steps? Our whole movement, the practical program of action. And the reason why I broke it down into 12 steps is after studying, pondering, thinking, analyzing, and looking at our situation, the reality of the matter is we're mentally sick. And we need a program of recovery. People that are listening to this video right now, when I say don't celebrate European holidays, celebrate your own heroes within our own history, that's common sense to all other people. But a lot of you are going to justify spending money on Halloween. A lot of y'all are going to justify spending money on Thanksgiving. A lot of y'all are going to justify spending money on Christmas, even though the United States government and its politicians currently are not advocating for what they're going to do for you in the upcoming presidential election. You're still participating in the system. You're sick. But how many of us are willing to get rigorously honest? That's the whole purpose of talking about black inventors and talking about heroes within our lineage on this land. If we're going to do our own thing, we have to get in the right mind frame, and then we have to put the right action behind it. And if it's hard, just remind yourself that's just how sick you are. See, we've been schooled into this way of living. All we know is their culture. What I'm sharing over the next 13 weeks is our culture. There's so many black inventions. I could do a 52-week campaign and still have black inventors that I leave off. But yet we only know about, well, I didn't even learn about Harriet Tubman when I was in school. It was Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, the Civil Rights Movement, and slavery. We don't understand that without us, we made the United States government great. We didn't receive any compensation for it. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. It's 400 years according to their records on this land when they started playing a medieval game and setting up a legal construct called slavery. We didn't get included into their constitution until after the Civil War, but there's a whole lot more history that I'm going to get into. We haven't finished the first Seminole War, but I'm going to talk more about that next week. We got 3 of them. Most of us only learned about the Revolutionary War, the Spanish War, and the Civil War. What we don't understand is the Spanish in Florida didn't really have a strong military like that. So guess who was able to help them fight? It was the Maroons, coupled with the Seminole Nation. We had a 100-year war on this land. Right at the end of the Third Seminole War is when the Civil War pops off. Right after the Civil War pops off is when we get the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. We were not included in their Constitution until after the Civil War. But I don't want to get ahead of myself and spoil the whole story. But let me put it like this. If me and you get into a fight, why would we have to fight 3 times? If we fade each other 3 times, why we got to fight 3 times? The only reason we fighting 3 times is because we won the first 2. And after the third war, when you learn what happens, you'll start to understand a lot better who we are. The only way they could defeat us is to lie to us. Because when we learn who we are and what we've done, all we got to do is follow the blueprint. But in today's society, we are sicker than our ancestors. We haven't done a fourth of what they've done. And we're supposed to be in the information age. We're supposed to be so much smarter and so much advanced, yet we don't have a military. We haven't organized any kind of campaign. If you are Generation X, you don't know what an American black movement looks like in real life. You don't know what that looks like. Can we organize one time? Can we turn up one time? At least for our kids. I mean, we did it in our 20s, in the 90s, in the clubs, you know, the whole rap era, the height of the rap era, the whole. I mean, can we come together and can we go down in history like our ancestors did in 1965, 1964 with the Civil Rights Movement? Can we go down in history, or are our kids' going to be reading about 1965? And then asking, well, what did your granddad do? What did your grandma do? Generation X, what did they do? They just had mass incarceration, chemical warfare called the crack era. Just something to think about. If we can't do a 13-week practical program of action, then bow down to the people in Alabama who walked for over a year and didn't ride the bus. Let me tell you what I did today on October 1st. I got gas at Quick Trip. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm only buying gas from Waste Ray and Quick Trip. Those are only 2 gas stations that hire our people. All the other gas stations in Atlanta, if you live in Atlanta, you know what I'm talking about. They don't hire our people. I remember a time growing up, you could go to the local store in your neighborhood back in the 90s and you could get a job. Here, these people have been over here since the 80s, got federal stimulus money in front of us that's been here under this system for 400 years. I'm not saying we've been on this land for 400 years, but we've definitely been under this system that they created for 400 years. And yet they've leapfrogged us. And now we've become a straight consumer class in what used to be our neighborhoods. As Dr. Claude Anderson always says, you've been locked in box. Ride around your city. Open your eyes when you get off work. Look in your neighborhood. Look who runs the gas station. Look who runs the dry cleaners. Look who runs the nail salon. We don't run or we don't own anything. So we have to start local. Why not start in your immediate neighborhood, in your immediate area? Spend your money with small businesses that are hiring your people. So we'll see. Just like any other campaign. Week 1 has to go by, one day at a time. Week 2, week 3, week 4. and we'll see what happens. If nothing changes, nothing changes. I'll be dropping another video next week, and we'll get back into the first Seminole War. And until then, it's just something to think about, man. We have to get on code. Do it for your kids. If you don't want to do it for no other reason, do it for your kids. Because these immigrants, they're setting up businesses. So when you see the young teenage girl running the cash register or doing the inventory in the store, yeah, they're keeping it in the family. Getting your money, have no respect for you, even though they're over here, but due to the civil rights laws, they're over here in your neighborhood, setting up shop, getting operating cash from each and every one of us. They don't hire our people. They don't donate any money via tax write-off to any of their local schools in the neighborhood. They do nothing. And it's time to put these nonprofit organizations on check as well. What are these churches doing to teach our kids? If our kids are not being taught history, our history, it's time to put their feet to the fire. Fraternities, religious organizations, all of it. Like, I don't understand. Like, we're the perfect generation to stop the madness. But what are we going to do? The marching and the praying, that was a whole different generation. We weren't rocking with that, but that's what they kept putting in our face on media. So it's something to think about, but at the end of the day, it's a goal. And in order to get from point A to point B in your life, you got to be disciplined. There's no way around it. Is it going to be painful? Yes, it's going to be painful because you got to change your habits. Places that you used to going to and used to spending money at, you got to stop it. Switch it up. And if you think I'm talking crazy, or if you're like, I don't want to spend money with black businesses, just know you're sick. You're sick. Because you're justifying the death and the destruction of your own people. And it's only because you've been lied to. That's the purpose of this channel, is to wake you up and help you understand that without us, how you gonna cook your kids something to eat? But you gonna be outside with a bonfire? Because that's what they were doing before we invented the range. How you gonna store your food? So you had to eat whatever you killed prior to us coming up with the refrigerator. Now you can preserve food. There's no reason for you to feel like you're less than. We are gods.